I think we'll give it just a couple of more minutes to let some more people on, and then we will go ahead and start. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining the IEHA Spring Virtual Conference. My name is Justin Dwyer. I currently have the pleasure of serving as president of Illinois Environmental Health Association. Just wanted to jump on and make a few comments to membership. So a couple items to bring up. We will have our Southern Chapter Conference September 7th and 8th. Down at the Pavilion in Marion. Starved Rock, November 8th and 9th for our annual educational conference. I know we have a lot of fun at that event. We've got some really, really amazing speakers that we're getting lined up. The board and myself, we're very excited for that conference. So make sure you guys get signed up for that and book your hotel room because those rooms do book up fast. Next thing I wanted to bring up is if there are any speaking topics that membership really wants to see, please reach out and let us know so we can find those speakers. I know we've got a couple on here that'll be kind of new topics for us, some emerging issues or items that are starting to show up in public health. If you are aware of something along those lines, please reach out, let us know, and we will do our best to find a speaker on that topic. The next point I wanted to mention is the IEHA board will have elections coming up. If you are interested in serving on the IEHA board, please send your name, bio, and what position you'd be interested in running for to our office. And later on this year, we will send out a ballot so everyone, all our members can vote. If you are interested and just want to learn more about what it's like serving on the board, please reach out to any of our board members. They're all listed on our website, iehaonline.org. Like I said, reach out to whomever, and we're all more than happy to talk about the board positions and what we do as a group to better public health in the state of Illinois. Couple housekeeping items to bring up too. Please make sure you're keeping your microphone on mute. If you do have questions, you can just drop them in the chat. Lainey with IPHA is going to be our moderator for today. So also a very big thanks to IPHA and their support in hosting Zoom and doing taking care of any of the tech issues that we might have. If you are having tech issues, please reach out to her or myself, and we'll see what we can do to assist you. And then we will also be sending out the CEU form that'll get sent back to the office, and then you will receive your certificate. We'll talk more about that later on in the conference. Remember, the conference is going to be 4 days total. So Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Thursday, from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Main reason, this is the third year we're doing this. We find, especially myself, sitting all day long on a conference is very difficult. So I think we found that breaking it apart into more bite-sized pieces and 3 hours of chunks of time is a lot easier on everyone, and you can still get things accomplished in the morning and work on other projects and then hop on the conference in the afternoon. So once again, I want to thank all of you for attending. I'm looking forward to a great conference, great speakers lined up, and I'm sure we will all learn plenty. I hope everyone enjoys it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Like he said, my name is Lainey Kepler. I am with IPHA and I will be your moderator for the day. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already done so, please make sure your username for your account is your first and last name. That is for continuing education purposes, to verify that you were actually in attendance. If you have questions during the presentation or after, please utilize the chat feature and let us know if you have any questions. So our first speaker for the day is Cindy Brooks. She is a senior rural development specialist located in Ohio. She has been in her current position since 2017, leading the Great Lakes Community Action Rural Community Assistance Program. In addition, she administers household sewage treatment systems funding programs for 5 Ohio health departments and assists other small communities with project development and funding. Cindy earned her Bachelor of Science in Agriculture Education and Agronomy from Ohio State University. So I will go ahead and turn this over to Cindy and make sure that she has all of the sharing capabilities that she needs.
Thank you, Lainey. I'm going to try and get this going here. I'm not real familiar with Zoom, so bear with me. Can you see that? It takes over my screen.
So Cindy, on your Zoom application, you should see, I have made you a co-host. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a green button that says share screen.
Yes.
And you will click that and then choose which application, whether it's PowerPoint or Canva or whatever you're using your presentation on, you'll choose that screen.
Okay, so then I start my presentation and you get, are you getting just the presentation and not the PowerPoint?
We are seeing your slides on the left-hand side, but I think if you go ahead and start your presentation.
There, does that work?
We're seeing your presenter notes. So if you go to display settings right above where your mouse is currently.
Mommy. I want Minnie.
You should.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
And then it should say switch view and slideshow.
There we go. Sorry about that.
There you should.
I'm not as familiar with Zoom. We work in teams, so I'm still learning all the different formats, so I apologize. But good afternoon. I am Cindy Brooks from Great Lakes RCAP, and I'm going to share with you a little bit more about RCAP as well. But today we're going to talk about opportunities for partnering for private well and spring education. Since I know all of your plates are fairly busy, this is a topic where we're hoping that we can help you out in areas or in times of when you're burdened with many other things. So just a little bit about me there. I'm using a previous presentation, but today I'm going to share with you a little bit more about RCAP, who we are, where we can be found. I'm going to explain our program, our education program. I'm going to share one of our assessments, and as a case study, unfortunately, is from Ohio, because fortunately I haven't had any bad experiences in Illinois to really be able to showcase as a case study. So that could be good, but I know there's probably some lurking out there that we just haven't met yet. And then I will provide you my contact at the very end. So RCAP is a national organization. We are, Great Lakes RCAP is just one of the 6 regions that covers the United States, as well as Puerto Rico and Guam. So it covers the entire area. Great Lakes, you can see in the teal color there, includes Kentucky and West Virginia, but most of the rest of our states are Great Lakes. So that's kind of how we got our name. And RCAP has been around since 1980, primarily prior to about 2015. RCAP focused on small rural communities, and RCAP stands for Rural Community Assistance Program. We assisted small communities with water and wastewater projects, specifically in the technical, managerial, or financial areas. And that continues, but in 2015, we added the private well program, which focuses, and there is some kind of timing on that slide, obviously. So it focuses on the private sector, people that are using wells or springs for their primary drinking water. So that's a little bit more about our program. Today, I have to thank US EPA for the funding. Although I do want to put a caveat in, even though US EPA funds this, it's not specifically all their information, because we do utilize in all of our programming any state or local requirements that are guidance to the private drinking water regulation. So if your county has specific guidance, and then the state has guidance, we utilize and promote that information also. And we like to focus on that. And fortunately, Illinois is a little bit more, it's easier to work in, because there seems to be more standardization, unlike states like Indiana, that every county is different. So it's a little easier to work in states like that. So our private wells and spring program includes education, and we can do virtual or in-person trainings for spring and well users, and then for professionals. And trainings for professionals can be focused on topic areas. So if there's something new or something you're wanting to get out to your well drillers or to other stakeholders in your area that are involved with private wells, we can help you by putting those together and do them as a training. And we can all partner together and bring in other presenters, whatever it may take, to make sure that training is effective and worthwhile. That's our big thing. In addition to trainings, we do a lot of one-on-one education with well and spring owners. And this is where we go out to their property and we view their wellhead, we view their spring, and there's various questions that we ask to try and get an idea of their understanding of the maintenance, as well as looking at source water protection points that we can help the homeowner understand. And I shouldn't say just homeowner, because It can be for someone that rents a property, and that's the case study I will show you was a property that was rented and how they utilized it to educate their landlord. So I will continue on. So I'm going to provide a case study. In the picture, it does show that I'm out doing an assessment. So we don't just look at the well. There are recordings that we do, although we never ask a homeowner to open the well cap unless it is already opened. As you can see, this one was probably one of those difficult, one of the wells that we had to do quite a bit of education because the well cap wasn't tight. So those are some of the things we're looking at just to give you an idea. This one here, you can see around the ring of the drain and the sink that it's black. And I wish I could get the video. It never seems to want to work. I don't know if I can get it to work. Oh, it will work for you today. So you can see how the water is coming out black. It's leaving the stain in the sink. And this is what drove the residents to call and start asking questions, because not only did we have 2 adults, but there was also an infant in the home. So they were very concerned, especially about mixing formula. So of course they were advised to use bottled water, but in the interim, they wanted to find out what they could do to be able to utilize their water. Oh. So the assessment that we utilize, and this is where what I used when I went out to visit these folks. The first section is pretty basic. It's just information about the person doing the assessment. So I have my information in there. The second section is more about the participant. And you can see down midway where there's an opportunity that you can put the owner's name and their address so that you can provide a written copy of the assessment to not only the person that contacted you, but to the owner if it's not the person that you are meeting with. One of the big things that we added a few years ago was how many years at this address a person has lived. That is to give us an idea of why they know what they know or what they don't know. Because if they've just moved in, they're not going to know a lot. And so that will help us. And it also guides us in the rest of the assessment visit as to what to share and educate the participant about. So if they've never lived on a well and they've only been there a few months, they need full education. So you know that you're going to be spending some time with them. We also look for well logs. As you can see, then the state or county well ID is added to this, and then there's more information about that back further in the assessment. Section 3 gets into a little bit more about water use, and this is to give us an idea for those that are on a low flow aquifer or indicating that they're having trouble obtaining enough water for their home. Gives us a start there to know how much water are they using, what are they using it for. If they're overusing, let's say they have a lot of garden, and maybe this is also education to utilize or to encourage them start using rain garden or rain barrels or something to collect surface water to alleviate some of that issue on the draw of the well, to leave them water for their sanitary purposes. In addition, this section also asks about if they have backflow on their well, and we encourage them all to have backflow prevention, especially when they have small children. And I love to use the analogy of the baby pool and a phone call coming in, they drop the hose in the baby pool and then go and turn off their water and what could have been sucked in. That usually turns some heads and makes people sit up at attention and think about some of the practices they do and why these kind of things are important. Section 4 brings in if they are using a spring, it's looking at their spring, looking at their spring box. Is it sealed? What kind of collection system is bringing that water to the spring box? Then if there's diversion trenches, what those are like. We also are looking to see if there's livestock near the spring, or even if what type of vegetation may be growing around it, things like that that can impact the disinfection process. We're looking at their overflows. Special notes that I've made on some springs that I visited is if they're chlorinating, are they also dechlorinating? And I like to note that to make sure they are aware that that is essential, so that they're not discharging chlorine back into a stream that could end up causing any kind of fish kill, even though most of the time when we have a spring, they're not discharging to a stream big enough to cause a fish kill. But to make them aware that that could be an issue is always important. We do ask them how often they clean their spring box, and then of course things like if it's been when it was constructed, and then if I know that this is that I'm going out to a spring, I'm usually carrying a jug, and I'll do some kind of preliminary or guesstimated flow rate. So I'll take my stopwatch and my gallon jug and try and get an idea of how many gallons per minute that the spring will provide. That way too, they also know, are they going to have a spring that's satisfactory for what they're needing to use it for. Most people already know, but there are occasions when we get people that are new to springs. The fifth section is the well information, and this is primarily taken from the well log, if there's one available. And oftentimes we'll search high and low before we head out to a property with no luck in finding no luck in finding a well log. But oftentimes after you've visited a property, you will find out additional information like who the original owner may have been, and what year it was constructed. So you have a little bit more information to go back and see if there's anything that can be located for that property. We do like to provide a copy of the well log or any information that we can obtain to the homeowner or the resident, so that they have a way of starting records. I've always made sure that I've informed them that they are the operator of a private water system. And then if they have a septic, they're the operator of a private sanitary sewer system as well. And just like public systems, the operators pass information from one to the next. And it's not a guess and see, or I'll take my records with me and you have to figure this thing out. You should be passing these records from one owner or operator to the next, so they know what they're dealing with in operations and being able to prepare for maintenance. So I always like to try and instill that in them. The big joke that I leave with them is that they just get paid the big bucks, the 000. So that usually catches most of their attention. In sections 6 and 7, those are both sections on the well pump and maintenance. This property here, this was the first thing that they did know anything much about their property. They did have a submersible pump, they knew, and they didn't know if it had ever been changed. But they did know that the landlord, because of the water issue, had changed out the pressure tank, and the treatment system that they had, and that was added. I apologize, I do not know where these additions of timing are coming from. They did have a pressure switch and a pressure gauge changed, and it was all done by the landlord's handyman. They did indicate that the landlord was not one to spend money unless absolutely necessary, and required the handyman to do most everything. That was one red flag that went up to me immediately. It kind of made me question what had been done previous to them moving in the 4 months prior. Section 8 gets into the water level or flow rate information, and oftentimes this will come from the driller's log. Sometimes it comes from when the pump has been changed out, that contractors will record the static level, gallons per minute, or the drawdown of that well, so that that information will be provided if it's accessible. We never open the well cap, especially if they're sealed, but we do not open it up because we don't want to be responsible for disinfecting and adding any bacteria into the system that may not have already been there. So everything that we do is a superficial view. Continuing on then, the household plumbing, this is information background. A lot of it was brought about because of the lead issues within public systems. So we ask the age of the house and the age of the plumbing. In many cases, there'll be plumbing that has been changed over the time frame of the house being owned. And so lead concerns are not as big of an issue, but if they have copper or any other form of lead piping, especially if it is lead, or even if it's galvanized, we do the lead education about drawing water until it's good and cold, to make sure that they are at least flushing those pipes before they're drinking it or cooking with it, and never cooking with hot water. All of that goes into this education, including being, we do include information also about deposits being made by hard water or other waters, like those high in iron, that they can be an impact for bacterial reasons. So we do quite a bit of education around the plumbing itself. In addition to the questions that you see, there's also information we ask about whether they've had pipe or fitting failures, pinhole leaks, or even blue-green staining, or if they have a metallic taste to their water. We ask the questions to try and get more information about their plumbing and what we're facing for education, and to help share with them. Section 10 gets into the septic system, and this section really drove the assessment for the property that we had been called for the black water. They have an aerobic system. We knew it was concrete because it had all the risers, and it was pretty old. I could tell by the age when I walked around the house. And they didn't know a lot about the system, being renters and also being there very little time. So we did the walk around of the house primarily because they are also in a floodplain. And I wanted to see impact as to what could high waters get to their wellhead. I was very concerned because the wellhead sat fairly low on this property, but when we were walking around, I could tell it was an aerobic system. There was an outlet out near it, but then I looked down and there was nothing plugged into the outlet. The cord was just hanging there. So I asked the homeowner, about if they had unplugged this system, or if they were aware that it had ever been plugged in, and their answer was no. So we immediately had the conversation that they needed to reach out to their health department as soon as possible and have that checked. When the health department came back out, they found that the tank was full of sludge, and it was actually discharging to a catch basin out by the road. So the system had not been operational for some time. The health department also had grave concerns that this was going to back up into the house. And the homeowner had complained of sewer gas in their house, or not sewer gas, but sulfur smell in their house, even when they called to request the assessment. And I had noticed a strong sulfur smell when I walked into the home, and I truly suspect that it was more sewer gas than sulfur, because their water didn't really test high at all for sulfur. And so that became the big issue at that point. The health department advised the homeowners then to find alternative housing because of having the infant in the home, concerns with the smell. And due to the fact that they were leaving very soon for a trip out of state to visit family, they did work with our agency to find alternative housing until that could be fixed upon their return. So it's nice working with a community action agency. We do reach out to other agencies to try and find assistance when needed, and this is definitely one of those situations. Moving on to the section 11, there's a miscellaneous, there's 2 questions. We ask if they have emergency power, looking to hope that they would consider having backup power for when they have no electricity, so that they are ensured to have sanitary conditions, especially drinking water during those times. And then the second question we have is about public water system. How close are they to it? And we will usually investigate that and try and get them to consider, if their well would ever fail, that if they are close enough, that they should look at both the economics of both. If economic, and typically economically, public water is becoming more and more feasible to be economically, because they don't have to put the money out all at once, and families can afford a monthly bill versus the big chunk of outlay that it requires for a private well, or even to rehab a spring. And usually a rehabbing of spring isn't even a feasibility. So we're looking at alternative methods there. Section 12 moves into the water quality, where we're trying to learn a little bit more about their testing practices. And this family had actually tested once because of the smells and everything, and their concern for the baby. So they had done some, but we also did some additional testing for inorganics and metals through our program. And this section is usually, it asks how often has the water been tested, and this is typically a never. Lots of education is done about how often they should test for bacteria and nitrates, learning more about their local area and making recommendations is a lot of times what we spend our time on, so that they can set up a testing program for themselves in the future. Always telling them to check their local health department website, because if there's something that's popped up in your area, and things can change all the time, that they should see if there's a recommendation as to what to be testing for, or being sure that they include in their testing when they do it. Their broader panel, inorganics and metals, we do recommend every 5 years. And then always educating them on keeping their test results, so that if things change, something doesn't seem to be sitting right, having the ability to look back and see when the changes could have happened. If they're as drastic as maybe it looks on a test, maybe when that could have happened, so that there's something for investigation on into the future. Section 13 moves into water treatment. This is an area where a lot of people don't know their treatment. In this case, we asked about disinfection, and they did know that they had had the well disinfected with hydrogen peroxide by the landlord's handyman. This was against our recommendation. Our recommendation would be to chlorinate it. Hydrogen peroxide just is not an effective method of disinfecting. I'm sitting on that national private well team, which includes myself and several others that do this in other regions, as well as some health department folks and university folks. And we've just been diving in a little bit more to provide improved recommendations out to states and counties that are asking about disinfection. And so stay tuned. If we find anything, we'll be sharing that. I'm sure we'll be having additional trainings to share that information with you to get out to your participants. In addition to the disinfection, like I said, treatment, a lot of people don't know what treatment they have or how old it is. One of the things that is being coming up in the industry is that softeners or any kind of unit that has any kind of media to it after 10 years, we're learning could be impacted by bacterias from the water system. And so it is recommended that those medias are disinfected, and there are treatments for that. The water softening or water treatment industry is becoming more aware of this and training folks to do this. My recommendation always is, if someone is leasing it, ask for a new unit. If you own it, contact your treatment provider and have them help you through the proper method to disinfect every 10 years, because that's the last place you want to have your bacteria coming in from, is your treatment system. It's supposed to provide you a benefit and not a problem. In this situation, the landlord had again instructed the handyman to install a filter, a sediment filter, and a carbon filter. Upon what I found, the filters were just loaded with black. The sediment filter, especially, I asked what the process was that they were intending to follow for replacement. The resident didn't feel that it was in their place to replace the filter, although I informed them that filters are fairly inexpensive, especially a sediment filter. And if it says black, it's not providing them any benefit. It was just really in bad shape. So I thought there should have been an additional treatment. So I did make that in written recommendations based on what was found. In addition, section 14 is geology and soil properties. This is just some information typically associated to their well log, although if there is no well log, we'll look at others in the nearby area to give them an idea. What is the typical water bearing unit and typical depth? In this area, there wasn't a typical depth. They were all over the board, but we did indicate that this one is groundwater under the influence of a river that was just behind the house, which is the flood provided for the floodplain I mentioned earlier, and how they needed to be very careful on anything that they would pour on the ground, anything in the area. And they were in a highly agricultural area, being in the Midwest. So being cognizant of that and making sure that they include the proper testing, that we made those recommendations to them. The 15th section is the wellhead inspection. This is where we actually go out and look at the wellhead and look to see what it looks like. Is the cap sealed? Is it at least 12 inches above the surface? Does it have a vented cap? Is the soil sloped out and away from the base of the casing to divert any surface waters? We look at all that. In this situation, they didn't have any of that. So of course, all the recommendations came in that just to meet minimum construction standards, sealing the well, having it disinfected beforehand, which could have led to some of their bacteria levels that they were seeing, since it was total coliform and not E. coli, which is very surprising with the septic issue that they had going on. So we look at all of that and then make the recommendations as to what the current construction standards are, and then what they can do cheaply or inexpensively or personally that they can help correct to help safeguard their drinking water. Section 16 gets into the well or spring site inspection. I think of this more as a source water protection review, looking at whether they're in a floodplain, or if they were, how many wells are nearby within the 300-foot radius, if they have abandoned wells nearby, if there's gas and oil nearby, all of those things, and then especially if they're spraying of fertilizer or pesticides. Being the Midwest, most of our area, it has some connection to that. If not, if they're in an urban setting, we're looking to see and asking questions. Are your neighbors doing lawn care? Do they apply? Because we know that lawn care facilities do tend to over apply fertilizers. Within the pesticides, they still have to follow label instructions, but that is still always a concern because it can be nearby. So we're looking at distance from those lawns, elevations from those lawns to see if could be any impact. In addition, we'll look at other things. You'll see that I noted agriculture here. I'm always looking at things like, are there older cemeteries in the nearby area, especially if it's within the upflow of the aquifer to that well. We're looking at highways, just depending on what could be traveled, especially being in the Midwest where we have a lot of chemicals and pesticides being transported by tanker trucks. We'll look at all types of things within a 1 mile radius. We look for manufacturing, of course, to see if there's any possible discharge, anything that can impact the well. So those are the kind of things that we look at for that. And then in addition, section 17, we add a site map. We include a Google map and notate things on the property. And this is to help in the future. So if in the future, if a person purchases this property and there's been all kinds of changes to the property since they are previous to them buying it, they know where there could be some old building sites, maybe where the septic was, if it's been replaced, things like that, so that they kind of know a little bit more about the history of their actual site that they're living on and what could be influencing their well. And then our recommendation section, these are written recommendations that include the education as to why they need to make the change. You can always tell somebody that they need to do something, but unless they understand why, they won't make that change. So we have we have a written recommendations. They are some template, but we do change it from property to property based on what we see and what their need is. So they'll get modified recommendations for their property. And so that's what goes into this 18 section assessment. And that explains that. This well, I'm still not sure, is the last I heard, the health department is watching this property closely because the residents never moved back. They found alternative housing and wouldn't go back because of the risk to themselves, especially the baby. And so I'm not sure that the septic anything has ever happened to it, but I do know the health department had requested that as much as the resident, that we send these recommendations and what we found to the landlord so that they would understand what the deficiencies were. And it wasn't coming just from the health department. It wasn't coming as a mandate or a requirement from the health department. So they thought maybe this would help. I'm not sure that it did, because I'm not sure they've put anyone back into the home. The last I talked to the health department, no one was living there, and I don't know that they were advertising the property at all. I haven't seen anything. So that's kind of the situation in this case. These are some quotes we have received back, because you may be wondering, well, is this useful to people? These are some of the quotes that we have received back following our visits. We try and make sure that they very much understand what they're dealing with and why they need to do what they do. That's our role as education in this matter, because you're the ones that have the more of the regulatory arm. And so we're always trying to promote that when there is a deficiency, that they either contact a licensed well driller, a licensed plumber, or their local health department to help them through that whatever problem it is that they have, since we don't do that role. I also wanted to share that starting probably this fall, I think is coming in our next funding, is we will be expanding our assessment to include more assessment of the septic system to also help guide them on that. I know I'm scheduled to go for a train the trainer event in June, so I will be learning more about that, and then we will be getting that information out to the rest of our staff across the states. So that will be coming, and hopefully we can help by educating people when we're out doing education on their wells about their septic as also, and then that would we're going to definitely be pushing harder for them to be in contact with you if we find issues. So at this time, that's what I have to share with you, and I could take any questions. I am going to advance my slides so that you can grab my contact information if you'd like to contact me later.
Thank you, Cindy. If there's any questions, you can go ahead and either unmute yourself or type your question into the chat box. Okay, Cindy, I'm not seeing any questions. We will include your contact information in the conference follow-up information.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will take a short break in our next session, which is non-community public water system program updates will begin at 2 p.m.
This is Eric Port.
Eric, do you have screen sharing capabilities?
I think so. I'll try this.
If not, just let me know and I can make you a co-host.
Let's see, share. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay, you can see my screen?
Yes.
Try to go to. Let's see. Slideshow. It seems to be letting me do anything.
Eric, you might have to click out of that notice that's coming up on your, or just exit out of it, maybe like that red.
Leave or stop sharing.
No, in your PowerPoint, you've got, it says notice most features are disabled. I think you might have to like acknowledge that notice before it will let you do anything.
I'm not seeing that. Where's that at?
I'm seeing it right above your slides. It's kind of a red bar.
Activate?
And if you go all the way to the right, you should be able to click that little X.
Okay. Can you see that now?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, I'm hearing a little echo. Is it sound okay on your end?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, I guess I'll jump in here. Just give me a heads up or something ain't working. So good afternoon, everyone. We were asked by updates of things going on in the program. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm hoping most of the folks on the call work with our program. If not, hopefully you'll still get something out of this. I want to thank everyone that does work with our program for all you're doing. I know over the last couple of years, we've asked a lot more out of everyone that works in this program, the non-community program. And we appreciate all that you're doing for us. It's a lot. I assume we'll do question and answers at the end through the chat or something. So we'll wait for that. Let's see here. Jump in. So just quick outline here. I'm going to just do some new and notable issues that are going on. And then Jennifer Crick is going to be going into greater detail on total coliform rule and everything going on with that. And then Benjamin Kester is going to go into detail on nitrates and nitrites. So first issue here, this is some good news as far as the coliform repeat procedure for systems that use the IDPH lab. We are rescinding the procedure to pick up repeat bottles at the local health departments, again, for systems that use the IDPH lab. Again, this is good news for everyone, we think. So the lab will resume automatically sending 3 repeat bottles when a routine sample is total coliform positive. So as soon as the lab runs a sample, a routine sample, and it's positive, they will automatically tell shipping to send out those 3 repeat bottles again. And they've already resumed that this week. Now, if you want to do your own repeats, I'm sure the lab will be fine with that. You can let them know. But otherwise, the lab is going back to sending out those 3 repeats automatically. And again, that's for routine samples that are positive. Okay. Now, if you do have a system that treats or has multiple wells, you still will have to ask for those triggered raw water samples. That's required on the ground rule. We'll try to work with the lab to see if we can maybe get that automated as well. And again, remember, these are for repeats. So if you're doing clearance samples, or if you're doing, just a sample on a well or something, it won't apply to that. But on your normal compliance routine samples, the lab again would be automatically sending out the 3 repeat bottles. So again, that's good news. Move to the next item here. What's going on? I'm sorry, my screen seems to be locked. Okay, here's use the mouse. Okay. Okay. So as far as the sanitary surveys, we're sending out a new procedure on that. It really doesn't change what you should be doing, but it is going to require that we track significant deficiencies and the required corrective actions when you cite a significant deficiency. So let's say you go out and you have a well that say the lid is unsecured or cracked, or say the casing's cracked, any whatever reason you cite a significant deficiency, I'm sure you are right now requiring that those are corrected in a certain amount of time. But we had a audit by the US EPA, and they said we aren't that we are not tracking those in our database. So this procedure is going to require that we track those in the central office. We track the required corrective actions, and anything that's unresolved after 120 days, we'll be sending out violations on those from our office. And again, we'll send you a summary of those before we send them out, and let you look at those over, and then we'll send letters from our office. But again, this is a new procedure that'll require that we track those and send a violation out. So we'll be sending out that procedure soon, probably from the next couple of months. Okay. And let's see, then a couple other quick items here. So public notice violations for 2021 will be going out soon. So again, as you know now, when we issue violations for not doing samples for coliform or nitrates, it requires that they also put a posting up at their facility for not doing those samples. Well, the compliance for not doing those postings comes around about a year later, and that's because of the way the rule is written and because of the way the tracking is done through our database. It doesn't track those a year later when they're due. So for any system that had an annual coliform or nitrate violation in 2021, we'll be doing compliance here in the next few days for any that we never got a posting back for doing for a posting that was required to go up for missing those samples. So we send a big list to you out for those, and you can look those over, but then we'll be sending a violation letter out to facilities, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions and concern about that. But again, that's for samples that weren't done in 2021. And again, they may have already corrected that, but we didn't get the posting for that. So those will be going out in the next few days. And then final thing, last item for me, as far as referrals to the Attorney General office. For again, any system that doesn't sample, that refuses to sample, they will eventually end up at the IEHA office. The first 4 of those were sent over just a couple weeks ago, and we're going to be asking for some fines. I think they're like a few $1,000s for each. So again, it's important to make sure your systems follow up on all their sampling. If they're sampling done, or eventually they will end up at the IEHA with a fine request. So that's all I had. I'm going to now turn it over to Jennifer Crick to go in some greater detail on total coliform and monitoring and follow up the contamination, seasonal startups, all that stuff. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I was worried because I have my headphones in. I wasn't sure the microphone was working.
And Jennifer, before you start, we actually had a question for Eric, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
Kristen says, since repeat sample kits are coming from IDPH labs, are facilities still required to get samples within 24 hours from date of notice?
Yes, Henry. Yes, they're still required within 24 hours. And that's why we went to the other procedure to try to get them taken quicker, but it just, with all the problems we were having, it didn't happen. So yes, the requirement is still 24 hours. If you can try to have your systems do the routine samples on Monday, I think there's a good chance you could get repeats taken in the same week if they're needed, because the lab is going to be overnighting those repeat samples. So, but yes, the 24-hour requirement is still there.
And there, it looks like there's a follow-up question. Does IDPH have guidance on what types of violations should be classified as significant versus minor?
We're going to try to clarify that as much as we can in that standard operating procedure we're putting together. We know that's an issue that needs to be addressed, and yes, we're going to try to address that as best we can. So, yeah.
Any other questions for Eric? Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Jennifer Crick with the Coliform program. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure. It looks a little, I have 3 screens. I wasn't sure which one was actually showing. All right, and you can still see it, right?
Yes, we see your like upcoming slides on the left. It doesn't look like you're in presenter
Okay.
mode.
Okay. I might have to change the screen that it'll let me share. Are you guys still there?
Yes, now I
Okay.
just see your like your blue background screen.
I don't know where my, okay. I apologize. I've never used, well, none of us have from IDPH have ever used this version of like we use WebEx. So this is very different.
So I can see your screen if you on the bottom of your where you're at on your PowerPoint.
Well, I have, yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
If you just click the desk, the little desk at the very bottom right next to your kind of like magnifying where you would make the screen bigger or smaller.
Okay, so you see this screen here, right?
Yes.
Do you see my pointer?
Yes.
Okay, bottom right.
Yep.
I'm down here. I don't see a, oh,
And
this
go,
thing?
yes. Yep.
I pushed that and that shows up on my other, I have 3 screens.
Oh,
so
okay.
I need to actually switch which screen. I can't find you guys. That's the problem. I can't find you guys where I can switch my screen. Oh, okay. So let's try getting rid of that then. No, I need to make it go, make this go away is what I think I need to do at this point. Maybe I could do it over here. I am so sorry. Mm-mm. Okay, there you guys are. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare. Okay, can you see this screen now?
I think you need to reshare your
Oops,
screen.
there you go.
Oh, there you
Do
go.
you see this one now here?
I see, yeah, with all of your desk icon,
Yeah,
desktop
okay.
icons, yes.
Perfect. That's the one I need then. For whatever reason, it popped it from my big screens over to this little bitty screen that I have. All right, do you see this screen now? Is there stuff on the side here?
Yeah, so now you need to go to your display
Okay.
settings, top
How do I
left.
get rid of that?
Top left, there's a display settings and you just need to switch presenter view.
Display settings, okay. Yay, okay,
Yep.
so you can see this now, perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
All right, so this is Jennifer with the Coliform program. I'm, gonna be talking about Coliform, obviously. All right, so first of all, the Coliform program, as you all know, is dictated by the revised total coliform rule, which we call the RTCR. It does have a sampling protocol, following a TC positive sampling event. So we do ask that you stay as close to that as possible because it is dictated by law what has to happen following a TC positive sampling event. And it's important because it standardizes the protocol following any TC positive event, protects public health, enhances the ability to pinpoint sources of contamination, including seasons of higher susceptibility. It streamlines reporting, increases productivity, reduces errors, and increases accuracy of all of our reports. And the bottom line, it is a federal rule, so we need to follow it as close as possible. If all of this information I'm about to go over, including, where you can find information on TC positive events, it can be found in our total coliform rule handbook. If you don't have a handbook, please send an email to the DPH email box and we can send you an e-copy of it. But everything that I'm going to talk about, all of the forms you need, everything is in that coliform handbook. So as you guys know, coliform is complicated, I guess would be a nice way to put it. And so there's a lot of abbreviations that get used. It's very time sensitive. And so it's really good that you understand the abbreviations. So I have put this in the slide here. Again, if you need a copy of these abbreviations, I do have a copy. You can just send me an email to the DPH box and I will send you a copy of the definitions. I have it on a PDF as well. But the regulatory authority, that is the local health departments or the regional offices. We refer to those as RAs. RT stands for routine. So when we're talking about your regular monitoring samples, those are routine samples. When we're talking about the 3 additional samples that you take, those are routine samples as well, but they're 3 that you would take following the month of the initial TC positive. RP stands for repeats. ART or TR, that stands for additional. I didn't put the definition there. I just realized that. Additional routine. Those are the 3 following the month following the month of the initial TC positive. Temporary routine, TR. That means the same thing. So when we talk about those 3 samples that you have to take the month following the month the initial TC positive happened, if you see ART or TR, those mean the same exact thing. On-site assessment, OSA, it's also the same as the triggered assessment, means the same thing. RW stands for raw. Another symbol or another abbreviation you'll see for that is TG, triggered sample, or well sample, WL. All of those mean the same exact thing. When we say we want a raw sample or a triggered sample or a well sample, we're saying we want a sample that's taken before treatment or as close to the well as you can possibly get. PN stands for public notice. There's everything. Anytime there's a violation, there's public notice that has to go out. So, and there's different types of public notices. So we also have like the precautionary boil order is a public notice. It's anything that is going to be posted to notify the public of whatever is going on. But anyway, so we have precautionary boil order, PBO, MBO, mandatory boil order. We have monitoring violation public notices, and we have seasonal startup public notices. I know a lot of you have heard a lot about the MA monitoring assessments. Those are the assessments that need to be filled out when a system misses their sample that was required. So they have to send in a monitoring assessment so that basically it's proof of saying which sample is their makeup sample. It's the paperwork that proves that that's the sample they want used as their makeup. SSV, sanitary survey. SS means seasonal system. SP is the abbreviation for special or other. These are samples that are not for compliance. So for instance, seasonal startup samples are not for compliance. Construction samples are not for compliance. Oh goodness, I just lost the name of it. Clearance samples, those are construction, or those are special, not for compliance, SP. So they would be marked as SP. And then of course the RTCR stands for Revised Total Coliform Rule. EC stands for E. coli. TC stands for total coliform. When you see a positive sign with one of these two, EC or TC, that means it was positive for that. When you see a negative sign with an EC or TC, that means they were negative for that. COC stands for chain of custody. So the pink sheets, that's the chain of custody for the IDPH samples. DS stands for distribution system. Those are samples that are taken from the distribution, not so after treatment, if it's a system that has treatment. WL stands for well. Now, a lot of times you guys people will send in samples with F in the sample type or ST in the sample type. We don't ever use those. The only two you should ever use would be distribution or well. Those are the only two we should ever see. All right, so I'm often asked where information should be sent. So all sanitary surveys, now these are different than the on-site assessments. All sanitary surveys should be sent to the regional offices, okay? All other information should be sent to the DPH box, that dph.noncomdata@illinois.gov. So what happens is it's kind of like a clearinghouse for our emails. It's the one email box that every single person in non-com can get into. That's why it's really important that it goes there. So if for some reason, one of us gets sick, somebody else can pop into the email box, the non-com box, and take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. But if you send stuff directly to us, nobody can get to it if we're unable to get to it. So what happens is when it comes into the DPH box, it gets auto forwarded to wherever it needs to go. Or we will, if it's something that doesn't get auto forwarded, then we go in and we put it where it needs to go. We do ask that you don't send emails to the DPH box and to us. And the reason being is that with 4,000 water systems, if you send something to me and to the DPH box or to Eric and to the DPH box, none of us have any idea if we've already seen the email once, and then we end up having to go through all the processes trying to take care of the email again, and it just doubles, sometimes triples, depending on if somebody accidentally forwards it to us thinking we didn't get it yet. It just increases our workload. We do ask that you include any clarifying information in the subject line to assist with auto inventory, chemicals or coliform. Please put those in the subject line. There is one exception. We do ask that if one of us emails you specifically, then please reply back to us and not the DPH box. If we've emailed you specifically from our own personal emails, it's because it's something that we're trying to track specifically for that system. All right, so we're going to go ahead and talk about what happens when you have total coliform positive samples. So, and I do, if you guys need a copy of this, I also do have this in a PDF form as well. Is this covering, can I move this? Yeah, there we go. So what is required when a routine monitoring sample is TC positive, EC negative? So positive for total coliform, but negative for E. coli. So the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to need to take 3 repeat samples within 24 hours of notice. The other thing you have to keep in mind is if the system disinfects, then they're going to need to also take a raw sample or well sample, right? 1 per well. If the system doesn't disinfect, but it does have multiple wells, then again, they will need to take a triggered well sample or a raw sample from the well. They will also be required to take, and those, by the way, those raw samples need to be taken within 24 hours of notice as well. They'll also need to take 3 additional routine samples or submit a waiver if the system qualifies for it, the month following the month that the initial TC positive happened. So if you had a TC positive that happened in January, that means in February, these 3 additional routine samples are going to have to be taken. Now, there is an exception to that rule. There's always an exception to the rule, right? If you have a system that's on monthly monitoring, they don't have to do the 3 additional routines because they're on monthly and they're going to take a sample anyway. All right, so what if your repeats come back positive? Or maybe you had multiple routines that came back positive at once. We call that what is it called a TC positive event, a multi-TC positive event. So that is when you're going to have to do an on-site assessment, okay? So you'll need to issue a precautionary boil order. You'll do an on-site assessment within 30 days. So if you had your repeats came back positive on February 1, then we need to have an on-site assessment by March 1. You'll also need to do 2 clean clearance samples marked special taken after the completion, we hope after the completion of the OSA. They also need to be taken at least 24 hours apart. Now, you still have to do the 3 additionals, okay? It's not one or the other, it's both. So if you have a TC positive event and you have to do an on-site assessment, you have to give us 2 clean clearance samples taken at least 24 hours apart. And on top of that, you also still need to give us the 3 additionals, but we need the 2 clean clearance samples first. So if for some reason you are not able to get these 3 additionals taken in that time frame, let's say you had to have them done during February, then you'll need to send an email to the DPH box to let us know so that we can move that schedule. Otherwise, because it's all done by the federal database. Once the schedule is in there, it'll automatically issue a violation. So if we don't move that schedule and you don't get the samples done, now your system has a violation. So it's very, very important. Everything with the coliform rule is very time sensitive. And if you need, like I said, if you need to move, send them to the DPH box. There we go. What is required when a routine sample is TC positive and EC positive? So you have, not only are you total coliform positive, but it also has E. coli. So everything that I just discussed is the same, except now you have to automatically issue a precautionary boil order as soon as you know that sample has E. coli in it. If the repeats come back positive, then you do have a multi-TC positive event, which will require the on-site assessment and all the stuff I just discussed. But you also have, what is now called an MCL, okay, which requires, so you'll need to give us a mandatory boil order, put up a mandatory boil order. You'll need to get an on-site assessment done. You'll still need 2 clean clearance samples, and you'll still need those 3 additional routine samples or a waiver, which we'll get into in a little bit. I get this question a lot. How is an E. coli MCL calculated? So it's any combination of a TC positive and EC positive split between your routine samples and your repeat samples. So you have TC positive routine and an EC positive repeat, then you have an MCL. If you have a EC positive repeat and a TC positive EC positive routine and a TC positive repeat, then you have an MCL. Or if both your routines and your repeats come back with E. coli, you have an MCL. So how do you go about waiving the 3 additional routine? So we cannot let you waive the 3 additional routine until we know that the water's good. And there's only 2 ways you can do that. So first of all, if your repeat samples come back TC negative, so you don't have anything in it, then you can go ahead and you can issue a waiver. But I have to actually have those samples in CIDWIS, or if they're not in CIDWIS, but you have a copy of them, you can always send me a copy along with your waiver. I'll get those samples put in and then I'll issue your waiver. But unless they're in CIDWIS, I'm not going to issue it. I'm going to reject it, and I don't hold on to your paperwork, because we just 4,000 water systems later, I can't hold on to, you know, paperwork for people. The other way is if you had to do an on-site assessment and your clearance samples came back TC negative, both of them, same situation. They had the sample results have to be in CIDWIS. If they're not, but you have the copy of those samples, you know, the sample results, you can send them to me with the waiver, and then I can go ahead and take care of all that. But if I don't have those proof that it's TC negative in CIDWIS, I will just reject it. All right, so I know I just went through the slides on how to take care of different issues with, you know, when you have a TC positive. Here, this flow chart is in our handbook, and you can follow it all the way through. It tells you from step 1 all the way through. There's like 1 or 2 little spots where you might have to ask questions, but so here it tells you, you know, if you have a routine and it comes back negative, well, then you're over here, you're done until the next routine. If you have a routine and it comes back positive, well, now you need to take 3 repeats and a raw for every well. So if you have 3 wells, you'd have to have, you know, 3 raws. Remember, raw means well sample or triggered sample. If those repeats are negative, well, then you follow this arrow over here and it tells you you're going to need to get your 3 additional routines. If your raw samples, or I'm sorry, if your repeat samples are positive, TC or EC positive, you know, then you follow it and you got to get some clearance, you got to do an on-site assessment, and then you're stuck in this loop until you get those clearance, right? And then once you get to TC negative clearance samples, then you come back down here to the additional routines. Again, keep in mind, if your additional routines are due during February and we don't get them, and you're not, or you know you're not going to make it, then go ahead, send an email to the DPH box so we can move them and keep the system from getting a violation. Once you get those cleared, then you can just follow that little arrow up right here. So it tells you if any results positive, yes, then you're going to go back over here. So if your 3 additionals come back positive, boom, you're back over here into needing repeats again. It's like starting a whole entire new TC positive event. You just start the whole thing over. If you end up, let's say you had to do an on-site assessment, right? You get your clearance, you do your additionals, they come back positive, and you haven't done that on-site assessment yet, you still have to do that on-site assessment and then do more repeats. But if for some reason these sample results were not positive, then you'd be over here and done until the next routine. So how does a system, I did not fix this one. I am so sorry. Oh no, this is the new one. I did fix it. Okay. So how does a system get repeats and trigger bottles? So as of 4/7/2023, which was like Friday, I believe, the lab will start automatically sending out the repeat bottles. But the RA, that's you guys, will need to send out the triggered bottles, those raw well sample bottles if they need it, right? Triggered bottles, the well sample bottles, are required of all systems that have multiple wells or use any kind of disinfection. They are required within 24 hours of notice of the TC positive. And this over here is the sample bottle request form that you would use. If you needed triggered sample, well, I'm sorry, yeah, triggered samples or raw well samples, you would fill that in here, okay? If you're gonna use it for clearance, it tells you what, you'd put it in there. And your additionals are right there. But yes, as of last Friday, we know the lab will automatically send out, like Eric told you guys, send out the repeat bottles, but you guys still have to order trigger bottles, and we need those taken within 24 hours. Okay, so how to fill out the chain of custody if you're using the pink sheet, the lab sample the COC is the pink sheet, right? The lab sample sheet, and this is for IDPH labs, RDPH samples. So how do you fill it out for your repeat samples? So every once in a while, you guys might need to go ahead and give people, you know, bottles, or you want to take your own repeat samples. Then what you would do is on number 6, where it says sampling point, it would be at the tap. And again, I have this on, if you want a copy of what I'm going to go through on this slide and next couple slides, I believe, I have a PDF that I can send you. So just send me an email. Anyway, so for repeat samples, you mark number 6, the sampling point is at the tap. Number 7, the repeat location, we need to know what it is. It'd either be original, upstream, downstream, or other. Number 8, you would mark repeat. Number 10C, we need the original lab sample number, the original lab sample ID number, right? And we do, it's for IDPH lab, we don't need the original collection date because that's already in our system. They just need the lab sample number to connect to connect it to the repeats. But if you're not using the IDPH lab, then you're still going to need to give us the original lab sample number, and we're also going to need that original lab sample date so that we can connect them together inside of CIDWS. How to fill out the IDPH chain of custody for triggered samples. So if you're going to go take a triggered sample for yourself, then what you would do is you would hit number 6 would be raw RW, okay? And I'm talking about these numbers are on here, right? So it would be, I believe this one, I think, is the raw one. Anyway, it's really hard to see there. Anyway, so you'd hit RW or mark RW. Number 8A, the sample type would be SP. Number 13, the remarks would be MPN method and with a /well sample. And then you would also need to still, when the sample results come in to you guys, because you'll get the lab sample results before I will get them, we need you to send the sample results to the DPH box with a note inside of the body of the email saying that it's a raw sample. And the reason being is that even though we get a download from the IDPH lab once a week, right now we don't currently have a way for them to tell us which one is a raw well sample. So the only way that we'll know which one for sure is the raw well sample is if you send us an email with the sample results, so we can go find that sample result in CIDWS and change it properly in CIDWS. If we don't get that, then it's just going to be marked special and we won't know what it's for. Oh goodness, I don't know why that little red mark is going across there. All right, sorry. I think that was, anyway. 3 additional routines. These are the 3 samples due following the month of the TC positive event. Like I said, if you had your TC positive event in January, then your 3 additional routines are due in February. If you're unable to get them to us in the allotted time frame, please request to have them moved. Or you can have a waiver, you can send us a waiver, but we have to have proof that either your repeats or your TC, your clearance samples are TC negative. So either the repeats or the clearance samples are TC negative before I can issue that waiver. So how does the system get the 3 additional routine bottles? Well, that's from you guys, the RAs. You order them with this form here, okay? Using this line here. Or you can use your own stock if you have some. Sometimes people just go out and do the 3 additionals themselves, right? Or sometimes they give them to the systems. But if you're going to order them, this is the sheet you would use. Again, these sheets are all inside of that Coliform handbook. So if you need them, let me know and I'll send it to you. You can waive the 3 additional routines but we have to have those repeats that, or the either the repeats or the clearance have to be TC negative. You can also check drinking water watch to see if your samples have hit drinking water watch or not. You can also use, and I've told you this before, you can use this form to order your clearance, or you can even use it to order, you know, regular samples, just even if you needed one regular sample bottle. Over here is the waiver, by the way. It's really important that you read all of these and make sure you answer them all the way, because if they're not answered properly, then I'll have to reject it. Okay, so make sure you read through all those questions and make sure that they're answered. So I'm going to go into on-site assessments just very briefly. When is an on-site assessment required? It's following any combination of multi-TC events. So 2 or more TC positive routine samples, or 1 TC positive routine and 1 or more TC positive repeats. It must be submitted to central office no later than 30 days following the TC positive event. So how do I fill out an on-site assessment, an OSA? So we know the OSA actually has a few ways you can fill it out, right? So if you're doing an initial sanitary survey, right, a found system or a new system, you have to fill out the whole entire thing, start to finish, okay? If you're just doing it for an on-site assessment, and we all know we can come to that question 1 here that asks you, do you know what caused the issue? What caused the problem, right? If you can answer yes to that question here, then you don't have to worry about filling out the rest of section 1, okay? But you do have to fill out the issue description here. You do have to give us the severity also. And you do have to fill out the corrective action as well as the date or anticipated date of the correction action. If I don't have all of that filled out, I send it back and I say, please fix these errors. If you answer no to this question, then you need to go through all of the section 1, like section 1.1 through 1.1a through 1.7 all those parts, you know, those subsections, and make sure you fill that out, okay? Any parts that have an issue, then you also have to fill out these 4 criteria as well, okay? So anywhere that you find an issue, you've answered no to this, and anywhere that you find an issue here, you have to give us the issue description, the severity, whether it's, you know, significant deficiency, MD, RD, or non-detect, right? These are recommendations, and minor deficiency, minor deficiency. And the corrective actions and the corrective action date, the date of the corrective action. If you also want credit for a sanitary survey along with your OSA, then you have to fill out all of section 2 here. By the way, I almost forgot to say this. Don't forget that you got to make sure you're signing these things, okay? I've gotten several of them back that weren't signed, and I had to send them back just to get signatures. So anyway, if you're going to fill out, if you also want a sanitary survey credit, you have to fill out all of section 2. Now I want you to notice that each one of these, here it says 1 is source, 2 is treatment, 3 distribution. When you go through these subsections in section 1, they're the same exact sections. Everything here, all of these numbers here, these different categories that you have to go and look at for a sanitary survey, are just in greater detail in section 1.1a through 1.7. So they're the same exact thing. So therefore, they should say the same thing. So if I mark section 1.1a with a minor deficiency, and I've got all my parts filled out here, right? My columns filled out here. Well, section 1 down here is going to have to say minor deficiency as well. They have to match. If they don't match, then I have to send them back. Because if you're telling me you want credit for both, you're telling me they were done at the same time. All right, I'm going to go through positive tracking real quick. or the positive tracking report, PTR. So what is the positive tracking report? It's just a report used to communicate system needs to avoid violations and return to compliance. There's roughly a 2 to 3 week lag, specifically during the busy season, which we all know are heading into right now. Make sure you check the time frame disclaimer on them, because if I say it's good up through February 3rd, well, if you sent something in after February 3rd, I just haven't gotten to it yet. So don't send it again, because we're trying to keep things as streamlined as possible. I also do ask that you really check it over carefully, because there's a lot of really important information on these positive tracking reports. It really is a good way to make sure that you are where you need to be in the sampling and to help keep your systems from getting violations. So this is just a snippet of what a positive tracking report looks like. So here, this is for Cook County, right? And so if you had multiple systems, they would be listed out by your IL3 number. So for instance, here's the IL3 number, here's the system name, here's the date that the sample was TC positive. Here we have the repeat section, and it says when it's due. And if we receive the sample, it's there. If the samples were good, it would say yes. This SAT stands for satisfactory. So these say no, which would mean since these are not satisfactory, then that means you would automatically need to have an on-site assessment, right? So if you look, this says 9/22/2021. Well, that on-site assessment is due 10/22/2021, right? Here you'll see, here's the due date of your 3 additional routines or your temporary routines. Remember, those mean the same thing. In this case, it looks like we hadn't received them yet at this time. That's because we're still working on clearance over here, right? So clearance, when you have an on-site assessment, you got to do your clearance. When I get that second clearance sample, it'll be in here. If you needed to do a well sample, it would be here. There would be a due date here, and once it's received here, right? So after we get this clearance sample, then we would be looking for these 3 additional routine samples or a waiver. But again, like I've said multiple times now, can't get a waiver unless I know the water's clean. So either your clearance samples have to be TC negative or your repeat samples have to be TC negative. I do ask that you direct all your questions to the DPH non-com box. And just it's easier that way other people can get to them as well. And I'm done with my section. And I do believe, or unless there are questions, I guess I should say.
Yeah, there are 2 questions actually in the chat box. So one says, what paperwork needs the IL3 number?
Everything. You can never, don't send me anything without an IL3 number. For 4,000 water systems later, if I don't have an IL3 number, I'm probably not going to be able to find the system inside of our database.
Okay. The second question is, because of the cost and time requirements involved in collecting 2 clearance samples 24 hours apart, Eric allowed the clearance samples to be collected together. Will this still be allowed?
No, they need to be at least 24 hours apart. They can be more than 24 hours apart, but they have to be at least 24 hours apart.
And those are the questions I have so far.
Okay.
If there are other questions, feel free to unmute or type them in the chat box. Okay, thank you, Jennifer and Eric.
Thank you.
We will take another short break and our next session will start at 3 p.m.
We still have Ben.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. All right, well, mine will be quicker than Jennifer's.
I went as fast as I could for you, Ben.
That's fine. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to run through the nitrate programs really quick. It's a lot simpler than coliform, so we should be able to get through it nice and easy. Some simple things. So for nitrite and nitrate, we do want to continue to make note that those are two separate things. I know that them having the same name has caused a lot of confusion, maybe not among health professionals, but along non-community systems for sure. Whenever I send letters out for nitrites, I get 1,000 responses back for nitrates. So nitrates are required to be tested every year. Nitrites are required to be tested every 3 years. And nitrate has an MCL of 10, and nitrite has an MCL of 1. For the non-community systems, there is a waiver available. So if they're over 10, if they fill out a waiver, which we'll talk about in just a second, they are allowed to operate as long as they stay below 20 milligrams per liter. However, because most rules are written for community systems rather than non-community systems, most of the triggered requirements, even for systems that are on a waiver, still use the 10 milligrams per liter MCL. All right, so this is longer, but it's really simple. So for testing, samples have to be collected after all treatments, which means take it at your sink or get it at a sink after all the treatments and stuff is done. Nitrates, like I said, are tested once per year. And if a sample from a system comes back and the sample exceeds half of the MCL, so 5 milligrams, because we're using the 10 milligrams per liter MCL, they are required by rule to be put on quarterly monitoring for at least a year. So for 4 quarters until they show they're reliably and consistently below the nitrate MCL of 10 or 20 there if we're operating under the waiver. They may also be put on quarterly if there's a major jump. A lot of times, if say they're already operating under the waiver, say at 11 and the jump to like 18 near the MCL, we'll go ahead and put them on quarterly for that. Nitrites are the exact same, only they have to be tested once every 3 years instead of every year. One thing to note is all of the nitrites in the state of Illinois are on the same 3-year cycle. We do that so it's actually easier to monitor them. I've updated this, but the last one just expired in 2022, and our current one is 2023 to 2025. So January 2023 to December 2025. So as long as all the systems take a nitrite sample at some point during those 3 years, they're fine. Guidance for switching that monitoring frequency will come from the state. So just because they've collected 4 samples for the quarterly does not mean that they're necessarily ready to be, or that we are ready for them to move over. If you think they are, as the local health officials, please contact me, and then I will talk to you about whether we agree and why or why not. The big difference for nitrates and nitrites versus coliform is that the state of Illinois lab does not do the testing for those. So all sampling for those must be done, all the results must be run at a accredited private laboratory. The costs and arrangements of which are the responsibility of the water system. So they have to use a Illinois EPA accredited private lab, which can be found at this link, but you can just find it by searching Illinois EPA lab list and just looking for the systems that are accredited, or the labs that are accredited. All right, so the big thing that we implemented this about 2 years ago, but we're continuing to talk about it, is what happens if a system exceeds the MCL, or 10 milligrams a liter. So the first time a system exceeds the MCL, they're required to take a confirmation sample within 24 hours. That's 24 hours of them receiving the notice that it's that high. So they should just take it as soon as possible. Once again, they have to contact the lab to make sure they're getting this done. If 24 hours is impossible, they're required to post a public notice and take a sample within 2 weeks is what we've done, since we recognize that a lot of times 24 hours can be almost impossible. And then results after that do not require a confirmation sample if it's over 10, but just the first one. So for nitrates, any result over 10 milligrams per liter requires a public notice and a nitrate waiver. That public notice, the nitrate waiver only has to be done the first time, but the public notice must remain up as long as the system is over 10 milligrams. So even though they aren't getting a violation because they have a waiver, they are required to continually post a public notice. And I'll show that to you in a second. If a system exceeds 20 milligrams per liter, they are supposed to cease use of that water for any potable purpose. A system will receive an MCL violation if they exceed 10 or if they exceed 20 with the waiver. And nitrites don't have any waivers. So if you go over 1, you have to have public notice and you'll receive a violation right away. All right, so here is the waiver that I've talked about. So it's really simple to actually fill out, but it does require that the system actually does fill this out. So it just needs the name and number of the system and a couple yes or no questions that should be obvious, that if whether they should be yes or no, and if they're not, then there's probably some health concerns that need to be looked into and require the signature. So when this is filled out, this must be returned to our office in order for them to actually qualify to receive the waiver, because we have to have a copy of this for our records. And they're supposed to have turned it within 14 days of being notified that they have a high result. So here's the public notice for them. So this public notice, the page on the right, they are required to have this posted for as long as they have high nitrates. And during that time period, you're not supposed to allow children under 6 months or pregnant women, anyone at risk should not be drinking the water, and they should be careful not to allow that. This also needs to be sent in to us with the waiver. So when they send the waiver in, we would like a filled out copy of this as well sent with it, just for continuing record that they're posting for our records. All right, for nitrates, nitrates and nitrites, there are 2 kinds of violations: the MCL violations, monitoring violations. We've talked about this for the coliform a little bit. So MCL means that the results are too high, which means the system has to go on quarterly immediately, and that they have to take confirmation samples to get back to us. And then they're going to continue to receive violations until they either install something to bring the results down, or they stop using the water and dig a different well, or they resolve it in some other way. But as long as their water is above whatever the MCL, 10 or 20, depending on if they're using the waiver or not, they will continually receive violations until it gets right. Monitoring violations are just when the system does not collect a sample when they're required to, yearly, quarterly, or every 3 years. They're required to post a different public notice for 14 days until they receive a sample. Unlike coliform, however, you do not have to make up nitrate samples. So if you missed 2022, you can take one in 2023 to bring the 2022 violation back into compliance, but they do not have to collect 2 samples in 2023. The 2023 one sample can both bring 2022 into compliance and count as a 2023 system or sample. And that's pretty much it. I went through pretty quickly on that, but nitrates in general are pretty straightforward. Here's just contact information for all of us. If you have any questions about nitrates or inventory, which is what I deal with, you can contact me here at illinois.gov, and there's Jennifer, and Eric, and Jamie Tassetti, who handles the non-transient systems, but who's not on this call. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ben? Okay. Let's see. Is our speaker for the third session on? Oh, it looks like we might.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. We will, if there's no questions for the IDPH team, we will go ahead and move on to our third session of the day. So our speaker for our third session is Charles Jones. He is a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Missouri, Rolla in 1986. Started with the department in 1989 in the Edwardsville Regional Office in the swimming facilities, recreational area, mobile home park, safe drinking water, and water well programs. He has professional engineering license that was acquired in 1993 and transferred to Springfield Central Office in 2015. In the swimming facilities program and was promoted to private well water and closed loop water well program manager in March of 2018. So Charles, you are free to go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, let's see if this is gonna work. Can everybody see my first page right there?
And so you should, in your Zoom, you should have to hit the green share screen button first, and then we will be able to see what you, your slides.
Okay. And let's see if this is the right one.
I do see it.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, slideshow started, correct?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, guess we can get going then. This is who I am, Charles Jones. I am the program manager, and you can see on the bottom there my work schedule. If you ever have any questions about anything about private water, closed loop wells, please send me an email. I know there's a phone number there, but we work mostly from home. And so if you call the number, you'll go to voicemail and it will come to me as an email. So that's how you may as well do the email to begin with. That is our website. Later, we will go to that and I'll show you a few things. But that's where everything with the department is. That is where the non-community program is. That's where the private sewage program is. And of course, the water well and closed loop program is. We did recently have some revisions to the code. Those were effective at the end of August in 2022. They have been added to the code that is online. You will notice online that there is a place that says printer friendly. Well, that was not the 920 code. I believe that's the 915 code. So we didn't get to change anything on the printer friendly. So if you want to print it out, unfortunately, you're just going to have to print out each section. Definitions. We had a few definition changes. The use of a thermal grout was specifically changed so that it is defined as both a surface and an aquifer to aquifer seal. And then we also changed the department's email address. And one of the first biggest things that we got to change, get rid of some stuff here. For cement tile, we are required to put together a list of tile that will be approved. So they're going to have approval numbers on the tile and of course the slabs. The cement tile, the manufacturers are supposed to be sending me plans, but I have yet to receive a single set of plans. So technically, as of August of 2022, nobody should be putting in a bored well because nobody has an approved well tile. So if you know of people, either send me that information or have them call me, somehow I need to get in touch with them so that I can request the information that I need. Okay. Why did it stop going? Okay, for some reason it's not letting me oh, okay. Seeing that it did that. It's not letting me Okay, well, let's try that. Same thing for a buried slab. The slab itself will need to be approved by our department. And again, we're going to issue a number. When this list is developed, it will be put on the website. Occasionally, we do run across some buried slabs that are made of fiberglass. Those have to be NSF ANSI Standard 61 approved. We will not be approving the fiberglass buried slabs. Those are already approved by some agency, and so there's no reason for us to do it. It may not even be legal. I don't know the details of that. This is something that is new. We put something in the code, and that's it, 920-90N, that basically says that the contractor has to protect the borehole. We ran across a situation, it was right about the beginning of COVID, where a well driller drilled a bored well and then left the site because the tile casing had not showed up. So for 3 days, there was a 110-foot deep hole, 3 feet wide, just open. So we can't have that. So we added this section where they have to control the hole. I mean, they can put something over it, big piece of plywood, another concrete casing, a piece of steel, do something to protect that hole. Well repair. Here we modified a couple things, and we're going to be getting to a couple of areas here where there's going to be some questions. Generally speaking, what this is saying is that wells that undergo modification, reconstruction, or repair need to be brought up to code, or shall be brought up to code. And we're going to start with pits. I know that's a big one. Almost everybody can handle just a regular bored well or a drilled well. That's not a big deal. But well pits seem to be the biggest issue we're having. And the code has always said that no new well pits shall be allowed. And existing pits can stay if they're structurally sound, don't leak water, and they got a watertight cover. If they do not meet that qualification, then they either must be eliminated after the installation of a pitless adapter, and that's a key, and there's a key word right at the end of that, or they may be used as a tank pit for water storage or a valve pit, provided the pit is not subject to flooding. The pitless well adapter shall be installed on the water well case. Pitless well adapters were more on the casing repairs. We did change the code. The code now says that just the installation of the pitless well adapter or pitless adapter unit, from here on out, I'm just going to call them pitless adapters, shall not be considered a modification of a well. Now that's just one sentence, but what that really means is that if somebody is just going to be working on the pitless well adapter up, they do not need a permit to do it. And that's the next section here. The repair of damaged casing above the pitless shall not be considered a modification. So if it's not a modification, it does not need a permit. And what is envisioned here is this is to allow people that have had their well casings, hit by a car and run off the road, just want to brush hog around and cracked it, so that they can fix their well without having to get a permit. Because as some of you know, the well permits in some counties can get a little expensive. And so what people are doing, they are hiding their broken wells. They're putting buckets over it, parking tractors over it with a cover over the tractor, doing anything they can to keep from having to by a permit. And so the thought is that it is much better for them to repair the casing on their own without a permit than to leave the casing open and letting frogs and snakes and everything else go down the well. Part of that, it was also decided that when you remove a buried well seal, that you don't need a permit for that either. I don't necessarily agree with that section, but again, you're just working from about the pitless adapter up. Permits. You got to have a permit to modify an existing well or to abandon a well. Closed loop. In the closed loop section, we basically defined what you have to do when you encounter karst. And I'm not going to read this to you, but it essentially says that you got to seal off one karst zone from the other with a bentonite plug. And a lot of people didn't know what had a lot of people ask what is karst, and essentially it is eroded limestone and dolomite, or as it says here, other chemicals. But those allow water to drain wherever it got eroded to, and so if chemicals hit that, if some contaminant hits that, it could easily get into the groundwater, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to avoid. In the closed loop section, we also changed, we never had any qualifications for what the piping had to be. So now we've qualified that the piping has to be a minimum of 160 PSI HDPE, which is a high density polyethylene or equivalent. And almost everyone I've seen, everybody that's called and asked if this pipe meets it, the manufacturer will specify that it meets this criteria. The heat exchanger fluid, we've added, it used to just say that you can use methanol, ethanol, or propylene glycol, or water, or a mixture thereof. But now we've added that you can use USP, United States Pharmacopoeia, food grade polypropylene glycol, with inhibitors that meet US FDA food contact requirements. Basically, if it's good enough to use on your food, it should be good enough to put down the hole and collect heat from the earth and then bring it back up. There are still some heat pump units that use refrigeration, just like your air conditioner. And those refrigerants that they can currently use are the R134A and the R290. R134A is basically, it's not basic, it is the same stuff you use in your cars. And the R290 is propane. And those are all non-ozone depleting chemicals. Other refrigerants can and will be approved on a case-by-case basis, but they'll have to be eco-friendly, non-ozone depleting refrigerants. If they're going to seal a closed loop well, they have to remove all of those fluids, and I'm not going to read this verbatim. They have to remove all the fluids. If they are refrigerants, they have to be extracted using an extraction machine like they do for your car or for your house. The piping, if it's been, grouted in place, all the piping left in place has to be pumped with neat cement or grout. And open or cased well should be sealed the same as a water well. That's what it says, 920, 120. And abandoned wells, abandoned closed loop wells, have to be brought into compliance or sealed within 30 days of abandonment. Now, we do have an exception, which is this next section. What if they have a school that wants to put in a system? So they call a guy in and he puts in one well, maybe two, just to see how much heat they can get out of the ground. Well, then he gives them a bid, and the bid to heat whatever it is they want to heat is, $20 million. Okay. No school has $20 million laying around. And once, the paramedics have left and the administrators are doing okay. It may take them, they may have to get some kind of a bond issue or something to, get the money to make this happen. So what we've set something up is that we can have an extension of the 1-year permit to leave it there, or the 30-day system. But they have to apply for that sometime between the 11th and 12th month after the borehole's been completed. Now, the thought process on this is such that somebody doesn't get a permit for the system, know it's going to take a while, go ahead and apply for the extension, and then forget all about the hole for 3 years or 2 years or whatever. And so we want them to be cognizantly aware that there is a hole in the ground that needs to be addressed. And so that's why that request for the extension shall be not less than 11 months nor more than 12 months after the borehole completion. Okay, we're getting through this pretty quick. There's numerous other changes to the code. Most of them are commas, semicolons. We changed gender specific references to gender neutral. We can't say his license or her license. No, it has to be the license. There's been no changes to the fee structures or the expiration dates for licenses. Okay, that's all I have for code changes, but I got more. I was going to tell you at the beginning it was only had 300 slides, but no, that's not what I have. There's only 60 some slides. Okay, contractor licenses. Anybody, I'm not going to run through what the contractors have to do to get a license. I covered that when I did this for them. But if you guys need to know anything about a particular license, and you can't find it when you look it up on GL Suites, send an email to either me or to Maria, and we can look it up on, or you can look it up on the website. But we can tell you everything. There's a lot of stuff you can't find on the website because there's a lot of information there that's HIPAA protected. So that's my email address, and that's Maria's email address. So you can send us an email. There are 092s, those are the well drillers. There's 435 of them. 101s are the pumpers, the pump installers. Those are 2,048 of those individuals. The 102 is a combined license between an 092 and a 101. It says 460. That is in addition to the 092s and the 101s. That's not part of them as well. And then the closed loop, there's 186 licensed people. That's 3,129 licenses. We can't answer every question about every single one. We don't simply have the time. Maria is very busy. I'm pretty busy. Maria works in 3 different programs. So if you go to that dph.illinois.gov, and if you get to the top, you see the resources. Down here about the 4th one from the bottom is the water well contractor search. And let's see if it's going to let me do this. It is. This is our website. So in order to find it, you would go to topics and services, environmental health protection. You would come down to all these ones on the left are all the different programs. You probably all know this already. Go to private water. And the contractor well search right there. Now here you can look up each individual, their license number. If you wanted to know if somebody was licensed in Iowa, you can put Iowa. But for county, you pick any county you wanted to. Bureau County, I just happened to hit that one. Let's look at everybody. Those are all the licensed people in Bureau County. Now over here on the right it says active. That means all of these are active people. During the renewal season, which starts October 1, over here on contractor license, it may say renewal or renewed. Those are people that are currently licensed but have been sent a renewal. If it says anything other than that, they are not licensed. And if you have any questions, then you could come back to us at those emails, and we'll be happy to look them up. Let's talk to Hannah a couple days ago. And let's see here. I think that's about all I need to see there. Okay, having a minor issue here. Maybe I'm not. There it is. So you can get a lot of information at this website for all programs. Okay. There we go. Some of you guys are involved with e-grants. We have 25 counties. I know that use e-grants for me, for my program. And what I want to let you know is please use the forms that are available in e-grants. They are set up specifically for e-grants. We must have a progress report prior to or at the same time as the reimbursement request. I currently have 3 counties that have submitted reimbursement requests, but I don't have a progress report. This would be for the 3rd quarter. I can't do anything with the reimbursement request without the progress report. Even if you've issued no permits, I have to have a progress report that says that you had none. The state fee or the fee is $100. So you wouldn't have to, that's already built into the form. And the form does all the math for you. If I can make this work. Okay, that's the first page of the form. The fee paid, as you can see, is already there. If for whatever reason you are charging a different fee for the ceiling or for a water well permit, you can change that number. But if your fee is the $100, you don't need to change it. You would just put the number of well permits for that owner, probably just 1. And the form does the rest of the math. For closed loop well, the $100 fee is for the first 10 wells. For anything over 10, you would just put the additional boreholes, and again, the form does the math. When you do your progress report, at the very bottom of the page on the right, which I don't have that here, it wouldn't fit on the slide, you would have a total. That total must match the reimbursement request. If it's not, I'm going to send them back. Something's wrong. Make sure they are signed. I get a fair number that are not signed. Water well inspections. What kind of stuff do you need to take with you? First thing is a lot of respect. The well driller does not work for you. You do not work for the well driller. You're both there to get something done. These are kind of handy. Take a lawn chair, take a cooler. Don't be bored. This is fun. Go out and have some good time. Don't wear your best shoes because well drilling sites are pretty messy. If you do, you're going to ruin the shoe. So utilize a check sheet. I did develop a check sheet. I can easily send it to you. It is not an official form. You are not required to use it, but it could help you out. If you kept this form in the front of the file folder for that well, off to the right, it has a place where you could check for things that you were code compliant or were not code compliant. And so whoever comes to do your review, that'd be somebody from the region. They could easily just look down that side and see what met the code, what didn't meet the code. And if something needed to be addressed that didn't meet the code, then they could ask questions about that. You're more than welcome to develop your own spreadsheet. If you want this piece of paper, it's a Word document. I'll be happy to send it to you. You can modify it, do anything you want to it. Like I said, it's not an official form. While you're there, you're there to make sure that the well was constructed in compliance with the code. You should view the inspection as something you get to do, not hang your head and say, oh, I have to go do this. No, that's, sometimes you're out there in the snow, sometimes you're out there and it's 100 degrees, but you get everything. It's wonderful, it's fun. Comprehensive inspections. There's a lot of misconception Everybody thinks that they have to do a comprehensive on every licensed contract. And that is not true. You have to do a comprehensive on every licensed contractor who installs 3 or more wells in your jurisdiction during the calendar year. You should generally know who that is. Yes, you might get a couple of random well drillers come into the county. Maybe they'll do 3 that year, maybe they won't. But generally, you should be able to look at last year and know who is working in your county and which ones you're going to need to do your comprehensives with. Same thing with well sealing, but that's not for 3. You need to do 1 comprehensive for every well driller that works in your jurisdiction. If it's a homeowner doing his own, you need to be there for that. The homeowner is not expected to necessarily know what they're doing. Well driller is expected to know what he's doing. What the contractor is responsible for. Contractor is responsible to give you 48-hour notice before he does the work. And he's required to do his work in compliance with the code. That is it. That's his responsibility to you, the local authority. So if he sends you a list on Friday of everything he plans to do next week, legally he's done. That's all he's required to do. It's up to you to figure out how to get there on time and what to do when. Again, keep in mind, he doesn't work for you. You don't work for him. Agricultural lime. Agricultural lime is essentially the very, very fine ground up dust, if you will, that comes from limestone chips. And so any place in the code where it says limestone chips, you can use agricultural lime. I did send out a memo about this to all the regions to send out to the locals. I sent that on May 14 or May 4 of 2018. If anybody would like it, please send me an email. I'll be happy to forward it on to you directly. I would recommend that when you read about the sealing, that you note there's a big difference between fill and seal. Fill simply just takes up the space. Seal actually seals it off. Okay, closed loop well systems. I know this is kind of goes open a little bit from we talked about them a little bit before. But basically this, with the diagram you see here, is an open loop system. They would pump water out of the ground, run it through their heat exchanger, and then discharge it out to either a pond or back into the ground. If they were to put it back into the ground, that might be considered a Class 5 injection well, and you have to have a permit from the EPA to do that. Those are not easy to come by. Almost nobody uses this. It's terribly inefficient. So what is a closed loop system? All of these are instances of closed loop system. They can either put the loop in a pond, bury it in the ground, or they can send it all the way down to the aquifers, which is where we get interested in the systems. The only one that we can authorize a permit for are the ones that utilize the well, that go down into the aquifers. This just basically shows you a little bit about what is happening in the closed loop system with multiple wells. Water goes down, gets changed in temperature, comes back up. The department does not have any regulatory authority over any heat pump system. The department does not have regulatory authority over any horizontal heat pump system. We only have jurisdiction over the vertical wells constructed to utilize Earth's energy. That's the well. All the headwork pipes, we have no jurisdiction over that. None. And this just basically tells you that we don't have jurisdiction over the horizontal closed loop systems. Pretty much more of the same. It does say that we will maintain a list of approved closed loop grouts on a website, and we do. And that hasn't been updated in a while, but it's still there. Closed loop system. This is table C out of the code. It basically gives you the setback distances between closed loop wells, water wells, and various things. This is pretty easy to read, but you'll notice towards the bottom for sewers, we have a couple of footnotes. And I get a lot of questions about these footnotes. These are the footnotes. I know you can't read them. They're very, very small. That's about as big as I can get it and get it on the screen. But essentially, number 4 says that you can put a water well or closed loop well within 10 feet of a sewer line, provided the sewer is watertight. So it can't be clay tile. It has to be, cast iron pipe, watertight joints, plastic that's glued together, welded steel, things along those lines. If anybody has questions about this particular set of footnotes or any of the footnotes, please send me an email or put it into questions and we'll see what we can do. Pitless adapters. Basically says that you cannot cut into, the code says you cannot cut up into, off, or below the ground surface except to install a pitless adapter below the frost level. And then it goes on to define what pitless adapters may be used, where they have to be approved from. Try to keep in mind that the department is not an approval agency. We rely upon third parties to approve everything. Everybody should look at this and immediately know what's wrong. 4, 3, 2, 1. The pump exits the casing below the ground level, not through a pitless. Can't do that. So when you're out driving around and you see these bored wells and all you see is the concrete sticking out the top, that's a code violation. This is the drawing out of our code book. There's a seal at the very top. That is basically a clamshell with 2 holes with rubber in it. And when you tighten it up, it squeezes the rubber around the conduit for the wiring and the conduit for the water line. And this is another drawing out of our code book. This is the buried slab system. This was developed some years ago. But with this method, you could bury the slab down here, seal this off, and then put the pitless in here, and that way your water line doesn't freeze. It's been a long time since I've actually seen a full bored well installed. Almost everything I see recently within the last 10, 15 years has been this type of a well. This is actually the pitless adapter. You'll notice the hole. That is what makes this an approved adapter. When the pump comes on, it pressurizes this connection between the casing and this pitless. And that's what keeps dirt from getting in there. It maintains pressure, which if anything does leak, it's going to leak out, not in. This is another approved pitless adapter. This one has a screw in that hole. It goes down through the pipe and pushes out on this flange, which presses this against the casing. It too is also pressurized at this point where it meets the casing. This particular one, if you're looking at it, the pipe, this is a short piece of pipe. This is just for demonstration. In the real world, this pipe would be about 3 feet long, and this whole thing would hang on this T-shaped thing on the top of the casing. This is a pitless adapter that you can buy at your local big box store. You'll notice there's no bleed hole in it. This is not an approved adapter. Unfortunately, the department can do nothing about retail sales, but this is not an approved adapter. You cannot make it you cannot make it approved by drilling a hole. You cannot grant a variance. If you see one, you got to make them change it. There's nothing good about it. Okay, the well tap, the well cap. What do you need it for? That keeps out the bugs out of the well. Keep in mind, that's the water people are drinking. Some people don't seem to care, but we care what's in the aquifer. This is an approved adapter. I'm sorry, well cap. And I'm sorry. The rubber seal in there, when you tighten this up, it compresses against the casing and seals it. The big threaded hole is where you would put an electrical conduit for the wires to run in, and the vent is so that when you pump water out, air can go in. This is another approved well cap. This one glues onto the casing. Hopefully you don't do it wrong, or else you got to buy a whole new everything. Again, it's got the threaded hole for the wires in the vent, and there's a rubber gasket that goes around this lip that seals when you tighten up the bolts. This is not approved. And it's not approved because they drill holes in the top of the cap, and there's no way to seal that. And according to the code, to be approved, the proposal must show that the entrance into the well cap is watertight. There is no way to make that watertight, and meet the following conditions. It's got to somehow prevent stuff from getting in there. I'm not going to read all this to you. There's never been one of those approved. And yes, we are getting very, very close to the end. There's a gentleman named Steve Wilson at the University of Illinois, Urbana, and if you are not signed up to receive his private well class information, you should. Please either call him or send him, I didn't get his email on here. Call him and ask to be put on his list to receive them. I do know there's one tomorrow. These are very, very good. He does a great job explaining, he's all about the groundwater and protecting it. And we approved this for ours once. Okay, we're getting to the part where somebody should be typing in some questions. Again, this is who I am. My email address. If you have any questions, send me an email. If you would like any of those forms, send me an email. The well inspection sheet. If you would like to have a copy of that, or this presentation, if you want a copy of this presentation, I'd be happy to send it to you. And the final thing, I am retiring. Yes, as of May 31, I'll be retiring. Plan to do some stuff. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Charles, and congratulations on your retirement. We
Thank
have
you.
one question in the chat box says, just to confirm, no bored wells can be installed until IDPH puts together a list of approved concrete tile manufacturers.
That technically is correct. We don't have a list. I was hoping to have the list done before I left, but nobody submitted any information. So I guess we're going to have a grace period. Legally, no, nobody is supposed to be installing bored wells. So if anybody can get me the information of the people that manufacture those products, I might be able to get something together pretty quickly, but otherwise it will be the next program manager. So as of right now, I'm going to say yes, let them continue to put bored wells in with what they're using. It will probably be approved depending on, I've run across some in the past that have got they had holes in the sides of them. And they said, oh, when we go to install them, we repair that with rockite or some other material. I go, no, you're not. This is not structurally sound. And so, yeah, we need to start approving them. I need to get the information. We can't stop the industry because we didn't put a list together. But at some point in time, somebody's going to have to put a drop dead date of when they have to have them, but I don't know when that will be.
Okay, someone else asked if you could go back a slide to your email again. And then the last,
Charles.W. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to sing it so they can write Charles.W.Jones@illinois.gov. We seem to like a lot of dots.
And the final question I have so far is, can a homeowner seal their own water well as long as they have a permit from the health department?
Yes, has to be in compliance with the code, and the health department has to watch the entire thing.
Okay, I don't see any other questions.
I kind of like that.
So thank you, Charles, and we will make sure that your contact information gets sent out with the conference materials.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, so that concludes our sessions for today. Justin will be sending out the continuing education credit forms for you to fill out for today's session. If you have not done so already, in the next couple of minutes, if you are watching this conference in a room with other people, if you have not already typed everyone's names out into the chat box, please do that before you log off. And our next session will be Thursday at 1 p.m. Thank you.